Hello, my name is Stefan Lodewijks. I'm the CEO and co-founder of iLeco, and I'm very happy that I can tell you more about our approach and offering towards sustainable smart buildings. I will tell you more about the context, why we're doing this, the strategy, how we're going to move forward, what are the benefits for you, and also what can we do together. So first of all, talking about the context. The context is really one about three major important changes, big waves in the industry happening now. So we're talking about climate change, we're talking about health, we're talking about digitization. So when we're talking about climate change, that immediately leads to the energy transition, which everyone knows about. The energy transition is one that's going to force us to go to a full green energy production, meaning things like solar, like wind, but also an electrification of a lot of different things that we know now from a comfort, being the heat generation, and also towards mobility will drive more and more towards electric mobility. That means the system is going from a very central approach towards a decentral and democratic approach. Second big change that we're confronted with has to do with health. We're actually experiencing nowadays the biggest challenge since recent history of humanity, being COVID-19. COVID-19 is forcing us to think, to act, to work completely different than we have done before. The buildings that we are working in will have to adapt and be very agile towards our new, very fast changing environments. And that immediately leads us to a next very big trend, being digitization. Digitization, in the context of intelligent buildings, is one where up till date we have had people that have been able to operate the building based on their own expert knowledge. That expert knowledge was great and we were able to get a certain performance of the buildings. Going forward, those buildings will become more smart, will be fed by a lot of different sensory information, will go to machine learning, AI, that can actually help us and advise that expert to operate its buildings a lot better than he could do before on his own. Actually, even going forward a step, this digitization, this AI, can lead to self-learning and self-improvement of the building, where at the end, the people living and working in the building will just have to define how they feel, and the building will adapt and optimize towards their specific needs. Now, based on what I told you about those three big trends, I'm going to tell you more about the benefits, very specifically focused around smart buildings. So when we have benefits, we have a couple of persona. So there's multiple people that I could highlight. I'm just going to take a couple. So as a building owner, building manager, for me it would be very important if that building can actually be sustainable in its value throughout the years. That when I buy a building now, I have a sustained value 10, 20 years from now. Therefore, smartness, knowledge, smart readiness indicators are all important elements to sustain that value. I also would really like to make a building that can operate very efficiently, because that means my tenants will have minimal costs. And that actually immediately leads me to the second persona, being a facility manager. His objective is to have that building run as optimally as possible. If we can provide him with the tools that he has, that previously mentioned expert knowledge enriched with AI, with real-time information, he is able to expose quite a lot of different value streams towards the tenants that he is responsible for and deliver that value. And that leads me immediately to the tenant. And as an example, I take the HR manager. So by means of that digitization, those sensory information, the HR manager can offer towards the people working for his or her company a much better, more comfortable work environment, where in the case of COVID-19, we will be able to meet and work according to the guidelines. We will have a comfort which is very specifically met towards our individual needs, and we will have the exact office space which will also be allocated to us. So we'll make a lot more efficient use of the square meters that we have. So just saying, smart buildings will benefit a lot of different stakeholders out there. So what's then the strategy to move forward on those big waves and those benefits that we discussed about? Again, when we talk about that building, the building owners now, the only solution they typically look at is They have a goal of services that they want to provide. Can be energy efficiency, can be office as a service, optimal facility management, and they typically go out in the market and look for a patchwork of different services and patch that together themselves, and hopefully at the end it will drive towards what they're hoping for. But here comes the big but. They have to now be in the driving seat themselves and look at all those different hardware solutions in the different buildings they own themselves. They have to look at tens of different screens, and they have to pay and be confronted with everyone out there. The strategy, which is a lot more scalable, would be one that all the hardware sensory information, the sensors and actually the actuators that can actually control things, are all abstracted by means of an intelligent Internet of Things cloud. That layer will then expose towards a service layer a uniform way that services can tap into. So here comes the analogy with the mobile phone world that everyone knows very well. So the mobile phone world, everyone knows there's a generic operating system on there, and that exposes on a uniform way calls towards an app store. And the app store allows thousands, 10,000s of developers to consume that and provide their specific, very specific niche there. That actually brings us to the fact that that building owner, facility manager, now just has to worry about their services and not anymore how they have to enable that. That digital layer in between, uniform, abstract, generic, will allow them to focus on the real thing, which are the services. But then, going even a step further, in that digital area, one element which is known in the construction world is actually BIM, Building Information Management, which allows construction companies to build more efficiently and to know more ahead of time how they're going to build, what are their costs. So that's something that's known already years and years, and they operate according to that. So if I take you through the flow, the construction company actually makes a model, starts in the implementation and builds the building. What happens is, when we have a certain performance in mind by design, that is most likely due to implementation choices becoming somewhat different. We might, for instance, choose a slightly different heating, ventilation and air system than was initially envisioned in the design phase. That might have a small hit on performance. Going forward, building is ready, is commissioned, is delivered. At that point in time, someone has to fine-tune and make sure that all those elements are working. Typically, that is also slightly different than was envisioned in the beginning. Again, not a big problem, but the link, the gap between how the design was conceived in the beginning and when we're starting to operate is already increasing. Let alone we're starting to operate. Operations, people typically really are more interested in working in that building and not very much about the actual operations of the building. Facility managers, they also typically don't know all the details in the building of all those detailed elements in the building. So what happens during operations, the gap between the envisioned performance in the beginning and actually the actual performance in operations is becoming bigger and bigger. Here comes what we think is an important element to improve, is that we add a digital copy of that building, not only by design, but also in operations. And that's known now more and more in the concept of digital twin. It's actually a twin from the reality in a simulated environment. What will that allow us to do? That will allow us to unlock a lot more real-time performance. It will allow us to detect anomalies. It will really allow a lot of what-if scenarios and enrich, therefore, that full digitization of those smart buildings. So that's really how we think that the strategy is going to evolve in that smart building area. When I then look at how are we going to fill that specific market segment, so iLeco is a company that really cares about the sustainable energy transition. So we want to provide software to enable that sustainable energy transition and provide economic and ecological value to all participants. Our focus to date has been very much on the built environment and the energy around that. That built environment, we've always seen that it's kind of a passive consumption base, but it will be the host towards those novel type of new assets entering there. First of all, a lot of different IoT sensors, and secondly, we'll have active components like solar generation plants, we'll have electric vehicles, heating, ventilation, airco, even stationary batteries. So there will be a lot more activity happening in that building. So the first thing that we do with that software is we provide behind the meter value. By means of self-learning, big data elements, we can learn the behavior of the building and its inhabitants, and we can look at, according to the comfort constraints, we can look at how can we decrease the consumption of that building. So first of all, providing a reduced consumption, which actually leads to a pure monetary value. Once that's done, we have the digitization, we have the forecastability of the building and its inhabitants. That means we are ready to actually enter to the next step, and we make the transition towards the building becoming part of the true energy system. And in the true energy system, we're actually looking at that you need forecastability of consumption and production, because the energy system of the future is one where there is a continuous market of demand and supply, and we have to match that. So that's something. First, we provide value behind the meter, and then we can be part of that network. And we do that in 3 elements. We do a type of digital twin light, a simulation element, where we can simulate what if we add a battery, what if we add a vehicle, how will that impact the financial returns of the building. We then go into operations in the building, mobility, and the end goal is that we think we can provide that aggregated value in energy communities. So that's what we do, and as a practical example, I have a very nice video, which is very short, about one of our customers that's using that solution and explaining the reason why he's using that.
Om de klimaatdoelstellingen te halen moet het gebouwenpatrimonium nog energiezuiniger worden. Zo verplicht Nederland tegen 2023 het energielabel C voor kantoorgebouwen. Maar bijna de helft haalt dat nog niet. Ontwerp- en ingenieursbureau Sweco ziet in digitalisering een oplossing om zulke gebouwen snel te optimaliseren en duurzamer te maken.
We zijn eigenlijk al een aantal jaren bezig met kijken hoe kunnen we nou zorgen dat het energieverbruik in het gebouw afgestemd is op het gebruik van het gebouw. Zorgend ervoor dat de kosten niet te hoog worden om dat te beheersen, maar ook dat het comfort hoog genoeg blijft natuurlijk. Wat je merkt is dat duurzaamheid, de energietransitie, het wordt steeds meer iets wat iedereen wil, waar veel aan gedaan moet worden. Dus de belangrijkste knelpunt is eigenlijk misschien wel goede mensen hebben om die in te zetten. Dus vandaar dat we ook heel veel bezig zijn met digitaliseren, automatiseren wat geautomatiseerd kan worden, zodat wij de juiste mensen kunnen aantrekken die ook echt het werk kunnen doen wat ze leuk vinden en het de klant helpen met zijn probleem oplossen.
Sweco riep de hulp in van tech-startup iLeco uit Geel, die een slim energiemanagementsysteem heeft ontwikkeld. Hun software analyseert het energieverbruik in gebouwen en kan automatisch bijsturen waar nodig.
Wij geloven dat we uiteindelijk wel software gaan nodig hebben om die energietransitie te faciliteren. Wij maken die software voor vraag en aanbod te matchen, voor uiteindelijk wel heel veel assets te digitaliseren. Op die manier gaan we de energiestromen beter in kaart kunnen brengen, beter managen, goedkoper maken en groener maken. Heel specifiek in die transitie kijken we naar grote gebouwen. Gebouwen hebben toch ongeveer 40% van de volledige energiebehoefte nodig in het systeem. Dus als je daar impact kan maken, dan kan je uiteindelijk wel een verandering brengen in het systeem.
Sweco en iLeco hebben het slimme energiemanagementsysteem geïmplementeerd in een kantoorgebouw van vastgoedbedrijf Marin in Utrecht. De resultaten zijn veelbelovend.
Het systeem van Sweco en iLeco biedt voor Merin echt meerwaarde, met name in de energieconsumptie, die gaat omlaag, en ook in de verhoging van het comfortlevel in het gebouw. Daarbij draagt het ook bij aan onze duurzaamheidsambities door middel van de reductie van CO2-uitstoot. En ook zorgt het ervoor dat wij onze concurrentie voor kunnen blijven door middel van het aanbieden van deze duurzame, innovatieve en digitale oplossing.
So, based on what you just saw in the video, this is actually a sneak preview of the baseline, which is going to grow further in that true smart building area. So, what we are going to short term do is extend that smart energy management towards all types of devices, adding more and more sensors there, having it as generic as possible, coupling with any type of energy market, auxiliary markets in different countries, and therefore being able to provide maximal energy value towards those buildings of the future. So an example here is for instance, Basics in the Netherlands, where we actually enabled them in a building where they truly believe that building should be the standard of how a building in the future works. They have a stationary battery, they have electric vehicles, they have a solar plant, and the goal there that is being executed is how do we optimally manage those energy streams and deliver maximal financial value. So that's an example that we pull further in the future. And immediately, once you have all that data, that sensory data, that possibility to act with the actuators in your building, it easily leads to extra incremental value. And so one of the elements is that we want to include the end user working in that building by means of an application. So that's on one hand another very interesting extra sensor. It's a real-time sensor which can go through the building. It also has a link with a certain persona there. And that will allow to actually improve that service towards a very individual feeling of that person in a smart building. We will also allow, by means of that app, interaction of how he's feeling in that building. That can easily lead to a next use case where we say we want to improve facility management. Recall my story about the digital twinning, where we have a copy of how the building should operate. Well, exactly, if we have a thought of how the building should operate optimally, we can at any moment in time slice and do a scenario and say, at this point in time, I think this is how the building should operate. This is the energy characteristics. These are some other operational KPIs. And we look at the reality. And if the reality is different, and there are some patterns which are sustained, we could trigger this as being an automatic anomaly detection, which actually improves towards that facility manager his ability to manage his facilities better, to actually not look at symptomatic management of the building, but look at proactive management. So understand that something could be wrong by means of early indicators which we have detected by means of the digital twin and the anomaly detection. Linking back to the app that I just discussed, that same app we can actually use to allow the user to also in a very lightweight manner help that facility manager in his task, and not feeling like a task, not feeling like a burden, but as an example, the user could say, hey, something's wrong here with the table. Let me take a quick picture and let me kind of just say, well, something's wrong. That could feed the system and improve the facility manager. So that's two easy, digestible next steps, which are an automatic extension of that approach of an IoT platform. First of all, focused around energy, and then naturally evolving towards other value streams. We have really solid construction experience from the BIM modeling, from the digital twinning towards really running buildings. We have very solid experience in the telecommunication, in communication, in big data in general, and we have very specific expertise, very broad expertise in the whole energy domain, and obviously also in that IoT type of platform. So those three elements together will bring a very important practical value towards smart buildings in the future. And we actually really look forward to receiving your feedback in the Q&A that will follow now, and also are very open towards side questions, so you can always contact me later on by email or by mobile phone, and I'll be very pleased to actually have a discussion with you to see how our offering can actually provide value to you and your buildings. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to the discussion.